Are you looking to get ready, be prepared, and transform your financial future? Then you've come to the right place. This is the Get Ready Money Podcast with Tony Stewart, where Tony has insightful conversations with financial experts who are changing the way we think about money. Catch up on the latest financial trends and hear practical advice from Tony and his expert guests so you can build healthy habits that work. Be empowered with tips for implementing small changes that can have a big impact on your financial future. So sit back and get ready to hear from today's guest.
Welcome to the Get Ready Money Podcast, changing the way we think about money. I'm your host, Tony Stewart. Estate planning and probate can oftentimes feel intimidating or confusing, but they don't have to be. Today, we're diving into how to make these conversations more approachable. Joining me today is Paul Deloughery, an estate planning and probate attorney. Paul, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you here today.
Good to have you here today, Tony.
Yeah, excited for the conversation. So let's dive in. Let's start with your origin story. What led you to focus on estate planning and probate?
Well, I had a unusual background. So my mom was a nurse, and growing up, we had a home health agency. My mom and I owned a home health agency when I was in law school, and then before that, when I was a teenager, she had a nursing home. So I've grown up around older people and caretakers, and dealing with people trying to figure out how to finance end of life care and all that stuff. I've been in that world my whole life, I guess. So it just seemed natural to me.
Well, that's fantastic. And I think that, it's one of those things that even sometimes people are a little nervous talking about aging and working with older people. So did that help you feel, and I'm sure it did, feel more comfortable talking with people through the aging process?
Well, for sure. Like my memories, even as a teenager, or like in middle, well, we called it junior high in Minnesota. On the weekends, my dad and I would go there, go to this nursing home. And when I say nursing home, it's like it wasn't a big institution. It was in rural Minnesota, in Lewiston, Minnesota, and it had 22 beds. And my dad and I would be the ones on the weekends taking the hair out of the wheelchair wheels so the wheels wouldn't squeak,
Oh, wow.
and figuring out why the one restroom smelled like urine and just things like that. And so that was just part of it. And for lunch, I mean, we didn't go to restaurants or whatever for lunch. There was a cafeteria. So we literally ate with the older people. And that was every weekend. That was my experience for years. So it's just natural.
Well, that's interesting. So, did you find, what their concerns were? How did that lead to estate planning and probate?
The commonality is everyone just wants to be remembered. Like everyone wants to leave some kind of a mark or something like that. And first, like, it's not a matter of like writing a book or being remembered for 1,000 years or something. I think most people deep down just want to have some kind of connection. I mean, honestly, the biggest fear that I saw in these people's lives, or probably the sadness that I would see, would be the ones who didn't have a relative to come and visit. And they just wanted to be remembered, even in just the smallest possible way. So, and that's I think that's part of what goes into estate planning is people, well, and this goes in all kinds of different directions, but people want to be remembered, one way or the other. I think there's a commonality there. And then it can go a little sideways sometimes when people start trying to make a point, like they want to make their last little jab at someone, and give everything to child one and nothing to child two, or something like that. Like, and then that's actually the stuff that leads to litigation later on, and which is honestly one of the main ways that we make money here is handling situations where families get into fights where people are treated unfairly or unequally, unfairly, however you want to say it.
Yeah, well, and that's interesting. Do you think part of that is that families don't have conversations when they should be communicating?
Oh, I mean, absolutely, absolutely. And this goes down to it. It's kind of basic stuff. Like, um, I I don't have a strategy, to give. Like, just do these 3 steps and everything's going to be perfect. It's it's much more basic than that. Like, you have to have a family. Uh, um, th- they Let me back up. The people in the family need to like each other, or if even if they don't like each other, be able to tolerate each other, be able to have healthy communication, um, trust each other, or if they don't trust each other, have some way of dealing with that. Like, some families have a drug addict, for example, or an alcoholic or whatever, and uh, part of that um, phenomenon, I guess, is lying. I mean, part of the addiction thing is lying to people, and so there's not the trust there, but learning how to, I guess, get around that and document it or whatever. But yeah, so it's more complicated. And so, like, my challenge as an estate planning attorney then is uh what I do as an estate planning attorney at a very fundamental level is I provide 5 basic documents: a will, a trust, general power of attorney, healthcare power of attorney, and a HIPAA authorization. And there's a living will, and then there's some other things that go along with it. But I also know that by itself, those are not going to fix everything. Like, you could have a perfect family with horrible documents and everything goes fine. And you can have a messed up family, dysfunctional family that doesn't know how to resolve issues, and where there's greed, jealousy, and resentment. And you can have perfect documents, and it's still going to be a disaster. So there's not necessarily a relationship between the documents and whether everything goes perfectly. I think your chances of things going well, um, for and I'm talking about the transition of money and assets from one generation to the next. If a person passes away, the chances of things going well are um, increased if the documents are good. But it actually, there's something at a more fundamental level also that's required. So I don't know. I hope I didn't go off on too much of a tangent there.
Well, I think it's one of those things that people don't talk about is, and it's common, across financial services, not just with estate planning. It's like, okay, you create this thing and you think you're done, but there's so many more factors that have to do with who we are as people, how we relate to other people, with our mindset and things like that. So, let's start, from I guess, the parent standpoint, the person creating the will and trust is, what should they be thinking about? And as you said, the documents obviously are something they need to do, but what should they be thinking about beyond that? Writing a letter of instruction, having conversations.
It's more process oriented than task oriented. That's my answer. And uh, there are some things that you can do. Sure, there are some tasks that a person can do that would be helpful. The Jewish tradition of doing an ethical will, I think, is great. Like, here's what I did. Here's how. Um, Here's some money I want to leave you. Here's how hard it was for me to earn it. And my parents, earned some of it, and how hard it was to keep it, and all the things. And here's how I'd like you to use it, like that. That gives some guidance. But that works much better if it's part of a process. And the process is, it's a little bit harder to pin down. The process is to have a healthy attitude towards money, towards relationships, towards, the meaning of the money and everything. Um, and so the Bhagavad Gita, I think that's a Hindu writing. There's a saying in it, something like, focus thy heart on thy work and not on the results. And so it's important for the parents to have that. I think and just as a human being, you're happier if you're focusing on your work than how much money you have, and it's healthier to focus on how you've progressed in life than to focus on comparing yourself to others. And from the recipient, the child's standpoint, it's much healthier for them to focus on the meaning of it and how they can work. Like, their focus needs to be on their life's work, not on the money they're going to inherit. Nothing good comes from a child focusing on the money they're going to inherit. Nothing. The good comes from them working on themselves, their own life, their own progress, and and then the inheritance fits within that. The inheritance isn't like, it's not a thing it's absolutely not gonna fix something. It's not gonna solve the child's problems or anything. If anything, it's gonna magnify any problem, any weaknesses or personality flaws or whatever that the child has. So anyway, I guess just to summarize, it's what the parents and the child and the children both have to do. They have to work on their own lives and see the money transition as a process, and not the goal in itself, not the goal in and of itself. I've never seen that work well, where the families focus on having this much money and how do I transition this money to my children and all of that. Like that just goes, it just is unhealthy. That's what I've seen. I can't cite to a study. I don't have a book to refer you to or whatever. That's just what I've seen. It in my own life too, and in other people's lives.
Definitely. And I think we can all relate to that, to situations either we've been in with our family or that we've seen our friends go through, or even cousins, where you see all kinds of different things, I guess, as a easy way to put it, when a parent passes away, or, there's an issue that comes up with an inheritance, is that things can get squirrely pretty quickly.
Sure, for sure. Yeah.
So, yeah, let's talk about probate just for a minute, because that is something that people go, okay, well, I think I've heard the word probate, but I have no idea what it means. So, could you define for us, what is probate?
So probate comes from an old word. I think it comes from Latin, and it means to prove. So it's like, fundamentally, it's the process of proving a will, but it means a lot more than that. So I'm in Arizona. Different other courts have different words for this. So take this with a grain of salt. But I think in most states, there's a court for family law, where you get divorced and deal with child custody and child support and all that stuff. And then there's a criminal court. We all know what that is. And then there's probate court. Again, it might be called something different in other states, but it's where you deal with dead people, people who are incapacitated. Maybe the court needs to appoint someone else to make financial decisions or healthcare decisions for this person, or determine who's supposed to be in in charge of their property after they've passed away and who gets it. So, so in Arizona, that's the probate court. And then what probate is, it's probate. We just talk kind of, I mean, it's a big umbrella for everything dealing with the issues of death and incapacity.
Well, that's helpful because, I mean, the one thing that you hear is people go, okay, got to avoid probate. That's, that's something. And, and just to clarify, do all estates go through probate, or do estate planning documents keep estates out of probate?
Yes and no,
Okay.
to all of that. So, if let's see. Let me explain it this way, and I think this applies in any state. So, let's say you have a house, and it's in Tony Stoyer has a house, and it's in Tony's name, and Tony passes away, and then and again, it's in your name. So, in that case, then in order to transition that to your heirs, whoever those are, your children, or if you have a will, your will could say, here's my house. Here's why I want to be in charge of my house when I die, and here's why I want to get my house. So that's that. Now, if you let's say you're married and you have the house in joint tenancy with right of survivorship with your wife. Now, when you pass away, that you could have a will, you could have a trust, but if the house is in joint tenancy, when you pass away, the house goes to your wife. Okay, so there's no probate, and people get confused about this a lot. Let me give you an example of a situation where there was a probate case that went on for years. There was a will that said, it listed out in detail all the different accounts. This bank account ending in 1234 goes to this person. This account ending in this goes to this person. This life insurance goes to this person. This condo goes to this person. All of that stuff. The issue was that the life insurance had a beneficiary, and who was different. And the house was in joint tenancy that went to a different person. And the accounts had a pay on death beneficiary that went to a different person. And so the will actually ended up, I think in that one particular case, there was I think there was a condo worth, a few $100,000 that actually went to the heirs. So that's what, or actually went then according to what the will said. So, and it was really confusing. It was upsetting to the family because the person who died had told everyone, you're getting this, all of this stuff. They had the will, and it went to court, and they were angry because everything went to other people. So that's where two things happened simultaneously. The accounts went outside of the probate, because the court did not need to get involved with the pay on death beneficiary for the bank account to go to the beneficiary. But there was a probate because the family members were angry because the will said one thing, and what happened is someone got involved right before this person died and changed the documents. So there was an undue influence case. So the case, there was a probate case that ended up being more about undue influence and confusion and miscommunication and anger and all of that stuff. But so your question, sorry, it just spent about 10 minutes not answering your question, but your question was, do legal documents prevent probate? I mean, they can. It really needs to be organized well. So the documents need to say something. The assets need to be arranged in such a way where the documents govern, and and then um, if those are done through the will, then the will has to go through probate. If it's done through a trust, then you can avoid probate. It's more complicated than saying that a will does or does not go through probate and a trust does or does not go through probate. It like you really have to have everything. It's kind of like with your car. You have to have the tires in alignment, and the steering wheel needs to work, and the brakes need to work, and for the whole thing to go in the straight line or go where you want it to go.
Yeah, well, I think you raised a number of things, and one of them, of course, is financial abuse, which we could probably spend a lot of time talking about. But I think what's probably the most important thing here is, what can people do to avoid some of those things? Is that because there's, some people are going online and they're using, we won't pick out any of these platforms, but there are online
Mm-hmm.
platforms where you can do your will and trust. You can see an estate planning attorney. Uh, you know, what can people do to at least try to offset some of these issues?
Well, so I'm going to be a little bit of a what's the word? Uh, I'm going to say something that's not the standard advice here. So, um, I mean, two things. One is to stay in touch with your loved one, for sure. That's a good basic rule. Um, but then also, honestly, the only way to make sure that your loved, like an older person, doesn't start to get dementia and and then have a caretaker come in that starts to get involved, and pretty soon documents get transferred, and there's uh, the house gets put in joint tenancy with the caretaker, and bank accounts have death beneficiaries put on with the caretaker and all this stuff, and the trust is amended, and the only way to prevent that is to have the documents written in such a way that prevents that. So, and that's something that, well, it's not standard advice, and um, and and it takes someone with some foresight, I think, to think, okay, I understand I might get dementia at some point, um, and let's put some checks and balances in place. You can do that, and it would look something like um, having well, you have to put restrictions on your own life. Like if you have a trust, let's say you have a trust, so the typical trust, like 99.99999% of all trusts are revocable trusts, and they say, I can amend this at any point. Now, the state case law the state law is going to say, well, you can only do that if you have the mental capacity, but how do you determine that? And that's where big, multi-year long lawsuits get involved, trying to prove that someone didn't, they didn't have capacity, and there was undue influence or something. It's a real murky area. So the way to prevent that would be to say that, okay, I agree. I want my two children to get everything. And from now on, for me to amend my trust, I'm going to require that my two children um, sign off on that. And that sounds like a radical, crazy thing for me as an American attorney to say, but it's not so radical. Looking at the big picture, uh, there's something very similar to that in Switzerland. Basically, in Switzerland, for you to disinherit your children, you need to get your children to sign off. That's the Swiss law. So, and it kind of makes sense. And then the other thing too, and I can't remember the exact statistic, but it was a little bit shocking. Um, a couple of weeks ago, I heard a lecture about dementia and Alzheimer's and so on, and there was, and I'm not going to get the percentage right here, but basically from like age 65 on, pretty much everyone has some degree of dementia. So, and it probably even starts before that. So like, it's like this dimmer switch, that just slowly turns the lights down. And you can't tell, like, when are the lights on and when are they off? When do you have dementia? When do you not have dementia? Well, I mean, it's a decline that goes on for years and decades. So I don't know. There's no switch. Um, anyway.
Yeah. Well, as you bring that up for people who watch and listen to this podcast, is you can refer back to my episode and I'll link to it with Chris Hay, where he talks about these issues with the mental decline, and that as you pass age 60, is that it becomes harder for you to make some of these decisions, either based on reason or math. So,
Yeah.
the things that I've seen exactly match up with what you're talking about. So a quick question on this is this something, a standard provision that an estate planning attorney could put in place that a kid has to sign off on changes?
It's not a standard provision. This is still, and I really hate to say this, but I think I have to. I feel like in some areas in our culture, we're still pretty archaic. Like, let me give you an example, and then I'll bring it home. So for example, with even in mental health, our the cutting edge method is to make diagnoses based on symptoms, but that's kind of like, I don't know. It's kind of like saying that. And again, and I'll bring this home. I'm sorry, I'm going off on a tangent, but
No, that's
with
great.
with mental health, like it's kind of like back hundreds of years ago, you would say someone had boils. Well, uh, how does that help? The boils are caused by something. So having a diagnosis of boils is not, that's not extremely helpful. With estate planning, the 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 state of the art has not gotten to the point of ensuring that you successfully transition wealth from one generation to the next. And that just sounds so dumb, because people pay really good money for, trusts and wills and documents. And then they leave the lawyer's office and feel really good about it. But I'm telling you that I can almost guarantee that the documents do not make it certain that that money is going to end up in the hands of who you want it to end up in. Like, because what is it? And I'm kind of thinking on the fly here, so I apologize. But I think the focus is on giving people as much independence and flexibility as possible in their documents, and helping them carry out their wishes, for what happens after they pass away. And because of that focus goes all the way up until the moment they die. But meanwhile, like we just mentioned a couple minutes ago, at some point, the dementia starts creeping in, and then they start becoming more susceptible to undue influence and all that stuff. So the estate planning attorneys are trying to give as much flexibility as possible, but then meanwhile, the person's cognitive ability and reasoning ability and awareness of if they're being influenced upon and all of that stuff, that starts kind of shifting and getting wobbly. And so yeah, things go haywire, and as a result, at any one time in our law firm, we have about 100 cases involving undue influence and all of that stuff. So I think I don't know. I think maybe at some point it might take centuries, but at some point I think um, we might, in the U.S., we might make it to um, get to the point where we really want to keep the money in the family. And right now, that's not, as a culture, that's not the goal. Right now, the goal is to, um, well, I mean, the government just wants taxes and give people freedom, and I'm not sure, but at some point, maybe the goal will become to keep the money in the family, and at that point, I think the estate planning profession will start, shifting gears a little bit. But anyway, that's not where it is right now. If you want specifically to like really make sure that you keep, that you keep the money, and or keep the money in the family, help my kids. I know I'm probably going to start losing my mind when I get older, and so help me uh, protect myself from myself. The attorney can take some proactive steps to help make sure that happens. So that's kind of where I'm at. I'm sorry, it's a long-winded answer, but there you go.
Well, it's a great answer because it's the reality. And I've seen this. I've done some elder financial abuse litigation consulting. And so I've seen this in action. And so for people who are watching and listening, this is real, what Paul is talking about. So, it's really important, as Paul mentioned earlier, is to have conversations with your aging parents. They could be uncomfortable. I have other podcast episodes where we talk about how to start those family conversations because
Mhm.
they can be difficult to have, but it is worthwhile because things are happening and people get taken advantage of all the time as they age. So if you want to
Yeah,
protect yourself and your
yeah,
parents,
yeah,
have those conversations. And if you're a parent and you want to make sure that your kids get your money, you have to open up and actually talk to your kids about your wishes and goals and let your kids in to some degree so that they can help you. So
sure.
Paul, let's get into what I call the Get Ready Hot Take Trio. These are three quick questions to help change the way we think about money. So these are rapid fire. The
Okay.
first one is, what myth are you trying to break when it comes to estate planning?
Um, the myth I'm trying to break personally is that all you need is an estate plan. I think the estate plan is a good foundation, but you also need more. You need um, a family culture of um, like with common goals, um, common values that you agree upon, and good communication.
I love it. Communication and common values. And that's really what it's about is because, like you've talked about, the documents can only go so far and the estate planning attorney can go so far, but the estate planning attorney can't be with your parents and you
Yep.
every day,
Right.
monitoring every move.
Yeah.
So you have to have
What
realistic expectations.
I can do that for an additional monthly fee. I just wanted to offer that. I'm joking.
Yeah, it'd have to be a daily fee. And I know that people have these same expectations from all of their advisors, but your advisors can only do so much, and your advisors can only give you advice based on the information you give them
Right.
and what they're updated on. Advisors can't work magic or read minds.
Right.
At least the advisors that I've met are unable to do
Yeah.
that. So the next one is, let's get out the time machine for a minute. What advice would you give your younger self, knowing what you know now about money and estate planning?
Oh my gosh. Um, if okay, giving myself, if I'm not saving, like if I'm not always increasing my wealth, something's wrong. That's it. Like just saving $1. Like if you're not at least like saving, you have to be positive something each month. And I went for okay, we're getting very transparent here, but what the heck? So yeah, I was not good with money earlier in life, and and that's just like driving with your wheel off on the shoulder. Like it's yeah, you know. driving down the highway with your wheel on the shoulder. I mean, you're like leaning towards getting off on the ditch. Like you need to get on the highway. And the only way to know it is like to just be positive, even if it's just $1. Like you got to be positive each month, some amount.
I love that. And that's probably, the most common answer to this
Okay.
question. So I think, hopefully for people watching and listening, that this reinforces the value of spending less than you make and putting some money aside. So to wrap up, what is your number one tip for helping people change the way they think about money in estate planning?
Oh boy. Um, Number one tip is focus on the process. And this kind of comes around full circle to what I was talking about before. Focus on the process. And so it's not a matter of just having some documents. Like the documents have to be in alignment with how the accounts are set up, and focus on those details, and focus on what your good kids are going to do with the money, and have that communication with them, and so on. So don't think about documents as being one and done.
Fantastic. Yeah, the documents are, I think if this is a good way to put it, a starting point,
Yeah,
a launching point.
for sure. Yeah.
So yeah. So Paul, where can people learn more about you and what you're up to?
Uh, Go to Sudden Wealth Protection Law. So Sudden, Sudden, and there'll be a link down below. Or you can if you want. But Sudden Wealth Protection Law. I named the law firm. It sounds goofy. It has nothing to do with lottery tickets or anything. I named it back in what was it, 2020 or 2021, and the idea was that kids, if they just get an inheritance without any context, there's a high probability that they're going to blow it. So there's more involved in that. And that's kind of what we've been talking about the whole episode.
Oh, fantastic. And if I remember right, I think we connected through Instagram. Are you active on Instagram?
Somewhat active on Instagram. I don't know what my handle is. I'm sorry, but yeah, I'm on
Oh, that's okay.
Instagram, and yeah, and so on. So
Fantastic. So, and for everybody watching and listening, as Paul mentioned, there will be links to Paul's social media profiles and to his website in the show notes so you can get in touch with Paul. So, Paul, thanks again for sharing your insights today.
thanks for having me on, Tony. It's been fun.
Fantastic. And thank you, everyone, as always, for tuning into this episode of the Get Ready Money podcast. If this conversation helped you change the way you think about money and estate planning, please be sure to subscribe and to share this episode with a friend. You can also join the Get Ready movement at tonystewart.com to receive my newsletter, podcast updates, and free access to the Get Ready toolkit. Until next time, let's change the way we think about money.